Hello and welcome to 21st Century Vitalism. This is a podcast exploring how we can best maintain a sense of energy, inspiration, and wakefulness while living with the unique stressors of the modern age. My name is Brett Kane, and I'll be your host on this journey as we have conversations with a wide variety of speakers who each hold a piece to this puzzle of how we can embody more fully in the present day. This typically includes esteemed spiritual teachers, somatic therapists, artists, activists, environmentalists, really just about anyone else that I feel has a life-promoting view or practice. For today's episode, we are joined by Dharma teacher, author, and environmental activist, Cynthia Jurs. Cynthia is a teacher in the Order of Interbeing, which was started by the late Zen master Thich Nhat, as well as an honorary lama in the Vajrayana tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. She's most notably recognized for her lifelong journey working with the ancient practice of the Earth Treasure Vases, which will be a topic for today's episode. This journey has taken Cynthia all across the world in search of how we can best be of service to the planet. This unique path she's charted out is deeply rooted in the reclamation of the feminine, honoring indigenous cultures, and our collective awakening. So if you feel a spark from this conversation, I highly recommend checking out her new book, Summoned by the Earth, Becoming a Holy Vessel for Healing Our World. It expands on the topics covered here by a great deal and shares some of her incredible stories from traveling the world for the past 30 or so years. If you want to support this show, consider heading on over to patreon.com/21st Century Vitalism and becoming a member. Any little bit helps there, though I do know funds can be a little tight, so if that's the case, you can also just subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, or like us on Facebook. Any and all interaction is appreciated and received fully. So without further ado, let's get to the episode. You can sit back, do some stretches, drink some tea. Most importantly, just open your heart for the one and only Cynthia Jurs. Okay, Cynthia. All right, so we are now recording. So hello, welcome to the show formally. I just want to start again by saying thank you so much for giving me some of your time, letting me see into your beautiful space back there. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here, and it's wonderful to meet you. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you for coming, and also thank you for writing the book that I've been kind of engaged with really heavily the past week and a half. As I was just telling you, I'm a little over halfway through it, and I am just finding it so important and potent, and there's just so many elements in there. I mean, we could have probably multiple episodes on each thread that you're working with, but I think for the listeners who aren't familiar with you or your work, starting with the foundation, kind of the ground of it all, and that is the Earth Treasure Vases that you are a major proponent of. This is a practice I've never heard of, and I've actually studied a bit of Buddhism. So I'm kind of curious, what exactly are these vases, and what is this practice that you've dedicated your life to?
Well, it's true. They are not front and center in the Buddhist tradition. They come from the Vajrayana tradition, the Tibetan Buddhist world, and originated in the 8th century with Guru Rinpoche, or Padmasambhava, who was the historical figure that brought Buddhism to Tibet. And he's known, among other things, as being one who saw into the future times and provided practices that would be beneficial to the future times. And in his lifetime, he was known to hide some of these teachings to be discovered at a later time when they were needed. And so the practice of the Earth Treasure Vases is one of those. And we all know that the earth is suffering. We're living in a time when the web of life is really unraveling right before our eyes, and there's just so much imbalance and strife in the world and everything else that we could name. And so this practice came forward. It started to come forward in kind of the Industrial Revolution times, and then really started to emerge through different lineages in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. I was really amazed and blessed to have the opportunity to go and meet a very old lama living in a cave in Nepal in 1990. And I was walking up the path, contemplating this moment, realizing I have the chance to ask a question of the old wise man in the cave, and what's it going to be, And so I reflected deeply, and what came to me was something that has been there my whole life, really, is just my love and care for the earth, and my concern about what was happening to the earth in these times. And so I asked him, what can we do to bring healing and protection to the earth? And I spoke to him about the things that are happening in the world today. And, he's never gone beyond the world that he was from in the high Himalayas, this kind of mythical world behind the veil, and yet his mind was very aware of, and his consciousness very expanded. And he listened very carefully. And I talked to him about things like radioactive waste coming off of the Los Alamos National Laboratory, where they produce nuclear weapons here in New Mexico, near where I live, and things like that. And anyway, he said, well, you need to get these Earth Treasure Vases and you need to put them in the ground, and they'll do that work. And I didn't know what to think, because it just seemed like, how could a little clay pot filled with prayers and symbolic offerings really address the kind of issues that we're facing in practical terms, but the other part of me thought, well, okay, who's to say how these things really work? And the changes that we need are going to happen on a lot of levels. We need to do everything we can. Where can I get some? And so one thing led to another, and I received originally 30, and then later another 40, and then later some of us crafted our own with a Native American potter here in this region, another about 30. So it's been going on for all this time, and they were delivered to us originally empty, which normally they're filled with these kinds of symbolic offerings of healing and protection that the Tibetan Buddhist culture would suggest. But in our case, they were concerned that once they're filled, they're sealed, and then they're taken to be buried in places in the world that need healing and protection. And they were concerned about customs and security, and so they gave them to us to fill. And they mixed a lot of very potent sacred substances into the clay itself, and then consecrated them. So they're connected to all the great lamas and masters of this spiritual tradition, and really, I don't know how it works, but there's a lot of power in these little objects. Sometimes I refer to them like, I'm like kind of like Frodo in the ring. It's like my precious,
Yeah.
But they do have amazing properties, and people fill them with offerings that are meaningful to them and precious to them, but also meaningful in relationship to the places that they're going to go.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, that's kind of how it all started, and what the treasure vases are all about.
Yeah. It was interesting as I began my investigation into your story, I also had kind of a similar idea of like, well, like practically, how do these things like actually help? And I don't know anything about the metaphysical kind of implications of them, but what I recognized with all of the stories of, going to the Congo and all these places that you go, they're almost like gravity wells of amazing people. The amount of support and community that kind of arises as you go to a place with an intention. To me, that right there was worth the price of admission, and just kind of connecting with all these people. And now we're getting introduced to them through your words.
Mm-hmm.
I found that to be very powerful.
Thank you. It is. And, like over the course of time, I went from carrying these little Earth Treasure vases around the world, which is still going on and does have very interesting results, but also to recognizing that we are each, as Joanna Macy would say, if you know who she is, holy vessels, and like these little clay pots are really giving us a chance to connect with our own offerings, our own gifts, our own caring for the places that we live and the things that are happening there that need healing, protection, renewal, and to engage, each in our own way in making a difference, and making an offering that is going to catalyze us to getting with the program, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that that was an interesting component where you bring the vase to a location and then the people from that place have their own offerings that are unique to their cultures and their customs. And, that kind of rings true to what you're saying about us being these empty vessels. And it's really the magic that we bring from our unique incarnations. And
Mm-hmm.
there's something about that emptiness as an ability to be filled with our unique offerings that I think
Mm-hmm.
is really potent.
It is, and it's, we sometimes get so overwhelmed with how bad the situation is in the world or what, like what can I possibly do? And so then we sort of go numb or just sort of throw up our hands. And I think each of us has a gift. Each of us has something to offer, and each of us has our lives are all important into the web of life. We can't deny that ourselves, right? And so the little pots really have come to serve as almost like ambassadors.
Wow. Yeah.
They open the door to making relations with elders, with people in different communities, with activists, with young people, older, all of it. And everybody kind of goes, "Oh yeah," because they care. And that's one of the things I've learned about the human condition is that, we all have this capacity to care and to love and to have compassion and to, um, and that's really, in a way, our greatest gift. And so to channel that into the things that really mean something to us in these times,
Yeah.
and engage it, and then the treasure vases are filled with all these things that like I could never have imagined because I don't come from Africa or Australia or South America, but those people have their own offerings, as you mentioned, and then of course the Tibetans have theirs, and and then they're all just imbued with this deep concern and this deep care. And then that's planted, the little pot is planted like a seed in the ground, and then you watch what grows from that seed.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you ever dial in where in the world needed these pots? I mean, I feel like if you stand back and look at the world, there's the cries of suffering everywhere in like such unique ways. How do you decide what gets it, what doesn't get it? What was your process for figuring that out?
That was a really hard one because in the beginning I was very overwhelmed. I didn't know where to begin. It was like, the lama said to me, "Well, oh sure, how many do you want of these little vases originally?" And I just was like, I don't know. Do I say 7 or 7,000 or
Yeah.
70,000 for that
Yeah.
matter,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when I received them, I literally put them away because I just didn't know where to even begin. And then we started having these signs of climate change and forest fires and droughts and all this stuff. And, it's like, okay, well, we just have to start working with these, who knows? We have to just start pulling them out. And so we started by creating, what ended up being a mandala. So this first location was up above Los Alamos National Laboratory. And that's kind of in the middle of this, what I call the Rio Grande bioregion. The Rio Grande River is the defining feature of this bioregion. And then we took one to the source of the Rio Grande because sources of rivers are very good because they carry the prayers, down. And then we went to the mouth of the Rio Grande because that's where all that empties out into the ocean. And then we went on top of the two highest mountains to the east and west here in this region because mountaintops are also really good. And that's where we started. And then it was like, then we had the center and the four directions, which is the basic sort of building blocks of a mandala. And a mandala is a symbolic illustration of, in a sense, like the awakened heart mind. And it's a beautiful map, really, to consciousness. But I saw that it could be applied to our relationship to the earth. And so, in each direction, we could go in the north, south, east, west, and all around, and in the center. And then they began to go out. And we quickly, I have a Sangha here that was helping with this, but we would meet every full moon and kind of do a practice that was based on the traditional practice of the treasure vases, but was really more non-denominational because I felt like wherever they go, people have to relate to them and not to some spiritual tradition that is the overlay. You know what I mean? Because it needs to go across the board.
Yeah.
So people came forward, and said, what about this or that location? And I too had a feeling for different places. And really it was spontaneous and intuitive because we couldn't approach it with the rational mind. It's just way too big.
Yeah.
But now, with all that we've done, there's close to 100 treasure vases, either already
Wow.
planted in the ground all over the world on almost every continent, or in process still to this day.
Wow.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah, it's been amazing.
I was pretty astounded by the level of courage that you had and some of these stories where you're going to these places that are incredibly violent and volatile. And, I'm just kind of curious how you kind of navigated that within yourself. Like, how did you resource yourself when you're going into the Congo, where it's literally the world's most violent place for women? Like, how do you mentally prepare for something like that? And, where do you draw your energy from for that?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, I was just so possessed to do this because I felt like, the world, the earth, Mother Earth, however you want to refer to her, is just calling out. And here is this little tool. And I just felt like I had to go. I had to go to these places. And once I got started, it just started opening up left and right. And I began to receive invitations and things. And Congo was a place that was really calling to me. I had heard about it being kind of the rape capital of the world, which of course is just appalling. And then to know that the rare earth minerals that in particular today fuel our cell phones and all our computer technology and all that, that's just being taken out of that earth. And it's really one of the most resource rich places in the world and a beautiful, beautiful place. But our idea of it comes from, like the heart of darkness and, things. And it's just the misconceptions and the abuse that has taken place in Congo and still does, was really calling to me as a woman. Rape is one of the biggest issues that we deal with in our families, in our communities, in our own lives. And it felt like, if we're talking about global healing, this is one of the core wounds that needs to be addressed and transformed and healed. And so, I was pretty passionate about it, and I just kind of like started hurling myself all over the world, honestly.
Yeah.
It's why I had to write the book, because I just went all over the place and I didn't really even think about it very much, like I just had to go. And it did take everything. I had to go into some of these places that I write about. I am a dharma practitioner. So I had the benefit of not only a group of people at home where I live that were my companions on the path, so to speak, although in the case of Congo, I didn't take a group with me because it was too dangerous. I had practices that I was doing and am doing to support me on the path. And at the time, I was doing a practice of Tara, who is one of the deities in the Tibetan tradition that, the deities are like aspects of our own Buddha nature. They're not necessarily considered like gods outside of ourselves, but we practice in a way to get in touch with those qualities within ourselves. And it's very, very helpful. And Tara was a huge ally to me during that period, to call on, to receive the spiritual support that I needed. And then I had founded a nonprofit that was an organization that was raising money to support these trips and also make offerings into the communities that we were going to support the work that was being done on the ground that we were praying about, And in Congo, we met amazing people from the indigenous elders of the land, the Pygmy people, who blessed and helped us with bearing the vase in the second largest rainforest in the world outside of Brazil, to women who are rising up. There's an organization called Hero Women Rising that is really empowering the women of Congo and also all around the world to make change, to stand for change. And they're now planting trees, to restore the forest there and protect the lands. I mean, the treasure vases are like awakeners, and Mother Gaia is speaking to all of us. And I have been, I've been forced in a sense to listen to her message.
Yeah. So I'm sure there's a lot of people who are listening to you right now who are feeling your passion and your energy towards this. But a lot of folks are so locked into their kind of day-to-day routine that the idea of going to somewhere like the Congo is just so far removed from just what is possible for them. So I'm wondering if there's a way to integrate a practice such as this that is for the layman or the householder. Is there a version of the treasure vases that you would say is just a little bit more accessible?
Right. I mean, it doesn't require you traveling to Congo.
Yeah, that's the first step is you got to go to the Congo. Yeah.
We do a meditation every full moon on Zoom now, and have for quite a while. But there's a whole global community that meets on Zoom every month, and we do this meditation that invites people to imagine all the places where the treasure vases have gone. We literally invoke all the locations so you can kind of get a sense of where they've been. And we imagine sending our love around the planet, and kind of firing it up with imagining it as in the form of light, going out from our hearts all around to connecting with the treasure vases, and then the prayers and the offerings and the intentions that are in the vases penetrating out into the earth and into all the places that are called for. And it's a really beautiful and uplifting meditation because, of course, we're suffering a lot. There's a lot of terrible things going on in the world, and it's a way to sort of like, I don't know, what's coming is sort of building ourselves up, with the muscle to be able to meet this moment and not go under. And so to come together in community, the meditation is, as I said earlier, it's very non-denominational. It doesn't require you to believe in anything. It's just like, we have to address it on all these levels. And we all know, I hope, that when we start with our awareness, it's like that's what leads to action. You got to start somewhere. and maybe it's like the places that you love and care about, you want to see protected. We want the oceans to be clean, the waters to be clear and drinkable. We want the animals to survive. We want ourselves and our children to survive these times. And so sometimes people have insights and it catalyzes, what's theirs to do. And then we support each other in doing that,
Yeah.
in community. So I also teach a practice that is a new practice, that is a practice connected. It's a meditation. When I say practice, it's meditation, but it's modeled after a Tibetan style way of practicing. That is a practice of the sublime Mother Gaia. And I received, kind of in the course of practicing with Tara and going around the world and really calling on Mother Earth to speak to me and guide me, this practice came to me, and a mantra that was a mantra of Gaia. And so that's another place that people can go to connect, but I always, and to do something that helps them to connect with a source, as we say in Buddhism, a source of refuge that is really accessible. It's no guru, it's nature, it's Mother Earth. And it's like we can also just take a breath and go outside and walk on the land or on the shore and stick our toes in the river and put our backs up against a tree and take a time out to catch our breath. And when we, this through mindfulness, when you breathe with awareness or mindfulness, you come back to what is really meaningful, and you come back into alignment with your own body, speech, and mind. And you also realize that you're breathing in and out with all the trees and all the animals and all the, forces in nature that are not separate from you.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's time that we cultivate that connection so that we can be guided by it and live in harmony.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like the way our society is structured is it's kind of removed us from like the long now and into like regimented calendars and planners and the clock. And I think as a result of that, we lose that sense of groundedness and like resourcefulness that we typically would kind of receive from interacting with nature. And that's something that I appreciated that you mentioned, of needing to muscle up and to actually look at the issues, but not being able to go under, and I think that that's typically where a lot of people, especially in my generation, kind of struggle a little bit, because it does seem so insurmountable. And
Yeah.
it seems like, oh, well, how am I ever going to possibly have any sort of influence on this? So I'm going to numb out. I'm going to go into social media. I'm going to just kind of doom and gloom, and I think that I love what you're saying about being able to connect with nature as a refuge, as a place to go in order to kind of fuel up, I think is
It's so restorative, isn't it?
yeah.
To take that time out and catch our breath and not be busy all the time, not be
Yeah.
running on that
Hmm.
endless wheel, that just goes around and around and around and actually doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
just keeps perpetuating the same old problems. And we're all prone to that. We all get caught in that. And so to stop, literally to stop, and to take some time out to return to our true nature, literally. And then it's like things start to get a little bit more clear,
Yeah.
about what's really important and what's not so really important.
Hmm.
We have a mindfulness practice group online as well, which meets twice a month, that is, inviting people to just come back to that really simple way of being and practicing. And I teach all of that too. And anyway, there's a lot of resources on GaiaMandala.net. But
Yeah,
I'm sure you
yeah.
have more questions.
Yeah, yeah. So, I'm curious if you have any insights into the mechanism that kind of encourages that busyness. Like, do you know why are we in that kind of predicament where we feel like we have to constantly be moving, and if you slow down even a little bit, it's just certain death?
Mhm. Well, yeah, I feel as if we have been on a track for a long time, collectively, that is, started so long ago when the, for lack of better description, kind of the patriarchal, hierarchical system that began to run the world,
Hmm.
began to really take hold, and we start to lose our connection to the earth and to the ground beneath us and to, ways of being that now, indigenous cultures still to this day uphold and connect with and make and prayers and offerings to sustain. But the dominant culture that many of us are living inside of has gotten so far from that relationship to each other and to the living web of life that we have totally forgotten, you know. And so we are in this sort of system of living and operating and getting ahead and all that greed and motivation from competition and all the rest of it that has gotten us into this mess, you know? And so that's why it's so important to stop and like to really question and come back to, like, I have a Dharma teacher, had a Dharma teacher who used to say, is what I'm about to do instead of or in addition to taking
Hmm.
care of myself.
Oh, that's good.
Yes, it's good. It's a little koan, a little maybe mantra, that we can ask ourselves because we override ourselves all the time. We sacrifice our own health and well-being for the work that we're doing or the, whatever it is we get ourselves into. And the habits that are formed through the patterns that have been going on through countless generations of like, you have to do this, and the voices inside of us that are going like this all the time. People talk today about internalized oppression, and there's so much external oppression also, which is another one of the core wounds that if we're hoping to bring healing to the earth and restore balance and harmony in the world, we have to address. But we
Yeah.
also have to address it in ourselves.
Yeah.
So, looking deeply, and meditation can really facilitate this, looking deeply at, whoa, how is that operating in me? How is what I'm doing um, not taking care of myself or others? And then to begin to like pick apart and open the way for a new way of being. And I think that there's something to be said for a more feminine way of being in relationship to life on earth that we all, whether we're men or women or something in between, we all have um, that kind of nature that is sensitive to life, you know, and to the life force within ourselves and within the world around us. And so to kind of like get back to that, and not let ourselves get carried away by the dominant culture's insistence on destruction. Like, let's
Yeah.
just tell it like it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we want to support life, not that destructive force that is killing the planet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very suicidal kind of an energy that we've been playing with, but it's one in which it's kind of in like a long form unfolding, so we don't have the immediate ramifications of it. But something I'm curious about, I've this has been a conversation in the Zeitgeist for some time about like toxic masculinity and just kind of like really re-embodying the feminine. What does that look like for somebody who does identify in a masculine way, but doesn't really know how to make contact with that feminine? Like, how does that manifest in different
Mm,
people in a way that's healthy and not maybe contrived? Or, I guess, what does that mean to kind of really embrace that?
mm. Such a deep and good question. And there's people doing that work. I could kind of list, but I think that one of the ways that let's just take you as an example, can access that, is like this thing of stopping for a little while, being willing to be vulnerable, to, like, you may know from your own meditation practice, when you stop and sit down and take some breath, sometimes there's feelings under the surface there that, if we're so busy or we don't stop, we just ignore, or we, suppress, or we deal with in ways that are unhealthy. And so, like being vulnerable, taking time out to feel what's under the surface, and to be willing to address ourselves and to be honest about what's working and what's not working, you know, and to look deeply into the face of suffering. I mean, I think we all, whatever gender we are, we would like to avoid that,
Yeah.
as it's painful to have to confront suffering. Um, but when we do, we start to unravel the patterns that keep that suffering going. And that's, I think, a way that, men have been taught not to do that, not to cry and, that sort of thing. And it's healthy to feel that way. And because it's like you get in touch with what's really important,
Hmm.
you know? And then it's like, take my hand. We're in this together. We don't have to be all alone, isolated. We can support each other, and we each have such a gift.
Hmm.
I don't know if that helps, but
Yeah, yeah, no, I think it does. And it's interesting for me to hear because it kind of almost flips the traditional notion of femininity on its head a little bit. And that I think a lot of times we associate it with a sense of softness. But really, when you make contact with a lot of these emotions that a lot of people are subduing, there's actually kind of an edge to them. There's something that's very fierce and something very bold that I think we don't normally see associated with kind of feminine energy.
well, that's so true. And we need that fierceness today. I've expressed it a couple times in this conversation. It's like you get to that edge and it's like, wait a minute, no, stop. This is serious. And we need that fierceness along with the gentleness.
Yeah.
And we have to find balance. The important thing is the balance, because it's gotten so overextended in this other way. But there's a place for that too, in response to restoring balance in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had another thought just to share briefly in relationship to kind of like how do we make these changes? Um, One of the things that happens when we do ceremony, or we go out into nature, or we meditate, um, is that sometimes that pressure of time kind of falls away,
Yeah.
and we enter a different way of, or a different experience of being embodied, and it's not conditioned by the clock or the pressure of what we're supposed to be doing right now.
Yeah.
And when that falls away, there's a kind of liberation, a freedom that And then there's kind of this awareness of like, oh my God, anything is possible, right? Because
Yeah.
we're not caught in that pattern. And so to find ways to give ourselves that sort of time out, but also the sort of sacredness of life that comes from, making an offering or saying a prayer or lighting a candle or, going for a walk in a place that is, you know, bigger and more beautiful than anything we know, like those things contribute to the causes and conditions that allow us to move into a state of being within ourselves where we realize anything is possible and we can do what our hearts are telling us, that more beautiful world we've heard about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the themes that I was really tapping into as I was moving through your book was that of pilgrimage. And this is
Mm-hmm.
something that is represented in cultures all around the world from all times, except I don't really think we have something similar to that in the Western culture. We have vacations, which are these like brief respites where we spend a week drinking on a cruise ship, but and that's what people look forward to. That's kind of like filled in. And it's kind of the same thing with our ceremonies too. I mean, when you think about what ceremony and ritual used to be to older cultures, it was to represent, shifts in the year and the weather. It was something that connected us with place and with time. But now, I mean, they've been removed. So you have like Halloween, which is kind of a step away from, the Day of the Dead from Mexico. And, we have like Thanksgiving, which is kind of like the harvest, but it's again removed from the actual practice of harvesting. And it's just interesting that in the Western culture, you see that correlation where we're very disconnected from time and place, and we're really busy, and yet we're also disconnected from these very fundamental human behaviors that have really connected us with each other in culture and belief. And, based on the stories that you were sharing in your book, I'm like, oh, that's pilgrimage. Like, that's what that energy provides us, is that space that you're
Mm-hmm.
describing where you're stepping outside of time and you're able to
Yes.
really connect again more fully with just the flowing energies of life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, pilgrimage has been so important to me and to carrying out this practice of with the treasure vases. But, life can be a pilgrimage. And one of the things that people can do that I've learned from taking the treasure vases around the world is like, you form an intention. In the case of the treasure vases, it's like taking it to Congo, say, and for the that part of the world to open to receiving this, and what will that look like? But we all can have an intention, like I want to bring more peace into my life. I want to um, I want to find the work that is meaningful to me, that will contribute to a better world, and not just be in this rat race, or whatever those big or small questions are. And then, you form this intention, and then you cultivate it by coming back to it on a regular basis and slowing down enough to where you can stay in touch with that as kind of like a core motivation, you know? And when you go on a pilgrimage, it's like you're holding that motivation. That's your number one job, really. And everything that arises on the path then is arising in support of that. You recognize it and you see it operating. And it's like the little signs along the way, or the conversations that you end up having, or the directions that someone happens to give you to go here or there, and maybe some of you have had that experience traveling in the world. It's like, oh my God, it's so fabulous how the world opens up. But I think that can happen for ourselves in our own lives without having to go anywhere, just by sort of like cultivating that intention for an answer. And then you don't try to figure it out. this is really important, is like, because I can figure out all kinds of things. We all can, you know, but what we figure out and come up with is just an idea. It's like, and then, you know, we can carry that out too, but it doesn't have the same impact or meaning as it would if we form the intention, kind of like offer it up to the powers that be, you know, whether it's, who knows, you know, whatever your source of refuge, your connection to something larger than yourself, nature or Tara or, you know, Christ consciousness. I don't know, you know, it's up to all of us to find what that is, because there are these forces operating that are way larger than anything we could figure out, you know, and it's like you just offer it up and then get out of your own way. Get out of here and move into here and allow that intention to start to operate in your life all on its own.
Yeah. Do you feel like the manifestation of that kind of practice is something both external and internal, or is it primarily an internal? I'm just imagining, I just thought of just an imaginary person who I'm sure exists out there, somebody who is working two jobs, has kids, is a single parent, is really, really locked in to a specific style of life, and physically speaking, doesn't have a lot of ways to navigate around it or to kind of advocate for themselves, you know, and in this idea of forming an intention and allowing that to turn your life into a pilgrimage. You know, I'm very keen on this notion. I think there's some people who are sensitive about kind of like the manifestation kind of thing where it's like, you know, and I know that that's not what you're referencing is like an irresponsible approach to that, but how do you tell somebody who is like really locked in how this kind of works? Like, how would you kind of interact with somebody in that position?
Yeah, I think that first of all, it would be, you know, what's calling to you? You know, like, okay, you're doing all this, and is it feeding you? Do you feel fulfilled? And, you know, I realize it's hard to break out of that when you have that pressure of all of what you've just described. But is there a part of you that might like to make some changes? What does that look like?
Yeah.
You know, like starting with something really simple, a little more time off, for example, or, you know, time to go to the park with the kids. And so what would that sort of take? Well, okay, so that's a good intention. Create a little more time off. I'm just using that as some, you know, mundane example, but it's a place to begin, you know. And then you go to the park with the kids and it's like, oh, whew, okay, you know, but when you go to the park with the kids, you don't fill your time with this, you know, all the time, for example. You set it aside and you be present with the kids in the park.
Yeah.
And then once you do that for a little while, you start to see things that maybe you didn't see before if you were glued to this thing,
Yeah.
you know? And then you remember, like, to take a breath. And it's so important to have the support of others. It's really hard to make this kind of change alone.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one
So
of the
that's
things
where
that,
community comes in. Sangha. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, that's what I was just going to reiterate is, you know, the power of the internet and the power of the fact that we have podcasts, which we can use as a resource. There's a lot of free online communities,
Yeah.
you know, and I think a lot of times I think that and I don't want to speak towards all situations, but many people do have an hour that they're not utilizing in a way that actually nourishes them. And most of the times it's because they just collapse into a comfort or some sort of entertainment because when you don't have that much space, any pressure release valve is going to be better than taking the positive steps that we need to start building a more resilient container. But I really do think, like, with the power of the internet, the fact that we're meeting, we're creating this space that people can plug into. There's so many opportunities these days to just like microdose Sangha, or
Yeah, yeah,
something like that.
yeah, yeah. It doesn't really take much to begin to shift. And, Thich Nhat Hanh is one of my teachers. He's no longer alive, but he was a very important teacher to me, and I'm a teacher in his tradition. And he would talk about, just when you hear, for example, in the Tibetan, or excuse me, not the Tibetan, but in the Buddhist tradition, when you hear the sound of the bell, to come back, take it as an opportunity, that sound, to come back to your breath and to take 3 breaths to return to your true self. But he applied that to the sound of the phone ringing, for example. You let it ring for 3 rings, and when you listen to the ring, you breathe. Or when you come to the stoplight at the intersection and you have to stop, you take 3 breaths and you come back to your true self and to the present moment. Part of coming back to your true self has to do with, stopping living in the future or the past, because we're mainly hanging out anticipating what's coming next or regretting what just happened, and then we miss the moment entirely, like the kids in the park, So there's a lot of ways to practice this, and it doesn't take a lot. You're standing in the line at the grocery store, and you're waiting to get through, but you have a few moments to just take a few breaths. And as one of my other teachers, Gyaltro Rinpoche, would have said, don't make a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this might be one of my more controversial takes, but I almost feel like the path of the householder, this hypothetical person I just described, the opportunity for awakening is just as powerful as somebody who is living in a mountain cave. It's more subtle and it requires a little bit more finesse, but I do think that once you click in to the nature of practice of waking up moment to moment in the way that Thich Nhat Hanh referenced, I think that there's something that is almost more powerful to it in really just embodying your current incarnation as it is, with the mountain of bills, with the screaming children. If you can just maintain, not even maintain, but if you can just connect to your breath every now and again, there's something about that is so incredibly powerful and liberating. And I think that, this platform that I'm trying to create here is really a big bell for that. Some people's dharma is to travel all around the world and meet all these cultures, but some people's dharma is to just waken on the spot where they are. And that actually is equally as important. And there's something about that you can become kind of a resonating bell for the people in your community. If you go work at whatever job it is, if you're just taking those mindful breaths, that echoes out, and those spaces have wakeful qualities to them, just like a temple does. But it takes kind of getting a clearing in the woods, so to speak. So I like what you're saying about start with the park. Just like if it's too hard to do it in your regular routine, just create a little space, 5 minutes to an hour.
Yeah. No, you can sit in your car for those 5 minutes before you go in to the appointment, and set the phone aside, set the text or the whatever it is you're doing aside, and just come back. Just come back. I love what you're saying, Brett, because what has really come clear to me is that we're in this process of what we could call a collective awakening now. Like on the planet, as time has evolved over the centuries, we have moved from one way of being, or one sort of the operating principles of life on Earth, to new ways of being. And we're so connected now, all around the planet. And the time of the lone warrior, the time of the, individual Buddha feels like it's not really what's happening now. Like, we need to wake up together, and each of us is important. We're each a facet of that jewel of awakened nature, literally mirroring the nature that is around us. And so, yes, it doesn't take that much. And we don't need to go to a cave in Nepal to have an experience of awakening, of liberation. And we can help each other, to find that path that's ours, to embody, as you say, the intention for being a good person. I mean, in some ways, that's all it comes down to,
Yeah.
It's just be a good person, care about life, and do what's yours to do. And, some of us have a big global journey, and some of us don't go too much further than our own backyard, But it's all part of the mix. I need you to be there doing that for me to be here doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just had this image of somebody becoming enlightened working at a McDonald's. Like, that'd be quite a trip, Like, I feel like there'd be a lot of lessons in that practice of, really reaching that state in such a mundane place that could be honestly more powerful than some of the more esoteric, advanced stuff. If somebody could manage that, that's some conditions to be working with.
Yeah. No, the Lama said to me, at the beginning of all of this with the treasure vases, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, these treasure vases are okay. It's a nice practice to do, but you really should be doing this. It's, like as if the treasure vases were sort of like almost misled focus to what is really important, And I was struck by that and sad, actually, and also felt like, well, God, I mean, I'm just doing what's coming to me. But it's not, like I didn't go down the path that they necessarily would have said, here's, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you get enlightened or whatever, But that's not how it felt. It didn't feel like, for me, what was calling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of trusted your own intuition and your own internal guidance system over that of somebody who I think most people would hear and they'd be like, okay, I'll do whatever you say.
Well, we want to be told, don't we?
Yeah.
It would be really helpful if somebody would say, okay, here's what you do,
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not happening. And there's so much, that's not really working with those old systems. And so we really do have to find our own way. And that's why it comes back to collective awakening too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was something that Thich Nhat Hanh talked about too, was the next Buddha is going to be the community, the Sangha, not, I think it's Maitreya is the name of that one.
Maitreya is
Maitreya.
the Buddha to come, the future Buddha.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. I was there when he said that.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. And it was just so powerful.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting being around teachers when they say something that becomes so established. It's like that first utterance, like the energy wave, I'm sure, is just a very powerful, potent thing. I'm very jealous that you got to spend so much time with him. And I know you're not supposed to acknowledge that, but, I've seen so many videos and read so many books, and really one of the more recent manifestations of that quality is just, wow, powerful.
Yeah, exactly. So, but we all have that awakened nature, we do. And it's just a matter of peeling back the layers to access it.
Yeah.
So we're all a holy vessel.
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Well, that feels like a great place to kind of put a bookend on this. So thank you so much. It's went by so quick. Really, really wonderful chatting with you. I do want to give you an opportunity to just kind of plug how people can connect with you, and if they're really resonating with your style of teaching, what can they do next?
Thanks, Brett. It's just been a wonderful conversation for me too. I'm really happy to share this time with you. Yeah, so the website is gayamandala.net, and that's where you can find all the various practice groups that I mentioned and sign up for the full moon meditation, which is a really good place to start. It's free. You don't have to jump through a lot of hoops to participate. And we send out a newsletter also that you can find on the website to be informed about when the meditation is happening or any other things that are going on. And that goes out once a month in prior to the full moon. The full moon being a time when, it said that in lots of spiritual traditions that the power of our intentions are magnified very strongly under the full moon. So we always meet at that time. And it changes. It's not a regular, third Thursday of the month or something like that. So that's why the newsletter is important. We also have a community on Mighty Networks called the Mandala, the Gaia Mandala. You can find us there. And there's a weekend retreat in upstate New York at the Menla Retreat Center, the end of September that I'm doing. And I'm going to teach the Gaia practice. And that's listed on the website. And other things, there's a pilgrimage in New York for young adults to reactivate a treasure vase that was buried in New York after 9/11.
Wow.
And we want to keep these prayers alive and keep those nodes on the mandala alive, because the world, it's a source. It's like there's a whole living body of these prayers in the earth.
Yeah.
So that's happening. And let's see what else. I have a website for my book the book is called Summoned by the Earth. And the website is also called summonedbytheearth.org. And you can find all the podcasts that I've been doing. I've been doing a lot of them, and this will also join those happily. And they're all listed there, and information about where you can get the book, which is more or less everywhere. And so that's a good start. Yeah. Love to have more of all of you come and join us, because this is a collective awakening. And this is a place and a time and a way that we can support each other in finding our own path. And it's time, right? Yeah.
Jazz fingers for that. Awesome. Well, Cynthia, thank you so much again. We'll hopefully talk to you soon.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Wonderful to meet you, and just many blessings to everyone who's listening.
Yeah, thanks. All right, that was the episode. Thank you so much for listening all the way through until the end. Again, that was Cynthia Jurs. If you want to support this show, head on over to patreon.com/21st Century Vitalism and become a patron. If money's tight, you can always subscribe on YouTube, like us on Facebook, or follow us on Instagram. I see each and every one of you, and I appreciate you very much. All right, so we'll catch you next time.